Welcome back for another car repair video. This time, it's the daughter's boyfriend's car. I may have done a video on this on the fuel pump. I'm not sure. But in either case, we have a 2007 Mazda 6. It is the front-wheel drive. It is the 2.3 liter four-cylinder engine. There's also a turbo version and a V6. Imagine what this car would be like with a V6. But this is the 2.3 liter. I believe they call it the 6i. And a little backstory. What happened was Friday night, and this is Tuesday, got a phone call from my daughter. She and the boyfriend are on the way back from Boone. I live outside of Durham, North Carolina. It's about a 3-hour drive. And I've always told my daughter, you know, if something goes wrong with the car, who do you call? Dad. So she calls Dad. They're about 5 miles away. He says, the car is smoking. Well, you know, front, back, couldn't tell me. And within 5 miles of the house, go ahead and drive it home. So when he got it here, I kind of knew what was going on, and I'll explain that in a minute. But when he got it home, the first thing I looked for was the power steering pump. See if I can get some light on the subject. And I've already partially dismantled this, but the serpentine belt was lying right over here. Wasn't broken, it was lying right over there. But look at the pulley. You might say that's crooked. And you might say at some point it seized. Now, at what point did I do that? It's rough. Can you hear it? It's rough. At what point did it do that, and why? Well, 3 months ago, he had said that there was a leak and there was noise in the pump. Okay? A mechanic told him. I told him, you need to get that fixed. You know, we'll go to the junkyard, see if we can get one. Well, he didn't do that. So what happened is all the fluid began to leak out to the point he stopped refilling it. So the pulley goes round and round, round and round, round and round. The pulley goes round and round and round until you stop putting in the fluid. So my suspicion is it seized, the belt popped off. What he doesn't understand is the other part of this is if the belt comes off, you have no way for the battery to be charged. You'll eventually run out of juice. And even worse is the water pump. If you have no belt on the water pump, if the battery juice doesn't run out first, the car's going to overheat. You stand the potential of blowing a head gasket. Now, is there any damage to the steering rack? I'm not going to know until I put this back together. But let me show you how I got it apart. I've seen some videos, and it's a little tricky. Now, if you look at the pulley here, the spokes are not very wide. They're relatively small. On one model, you could actually get your socket and wrench through here to undo the bottom bolt. There's a bolt way up under here. It's a 10 millimeter. Here are 2 more 10 millimeters on top. This is your high pressure line, which goes to the rack. And when you take this apart, be very careful. It's a banjo bolt, and there are 2 copper washers. So let me show you. I think I may have determined where the leak is, and I'll show you that in a minute. This was bone dry all the way back to the rack. All right, lift it up very carefully. You're going to see that the banjo bolt is hollow, and it has a hole in the side. That's to allow fluid to run through it. There's 1 copper washer on top, and there's 1 copper washer on the bottom. Try not to lose those. I learned a long time ago, just go ahead and replace those. They're kind of like a crush washer. You might not leak, but you stand a chance at leaking. So for $1.87 each, and I have to get them at the Mazda dealer, go ahead and replace those things. Now, in order to get to that bolt down here too, I also had to take this off and move it out of the way. And let me show you what set of tools that I used to get in there. Now that little bad boy is way up under there, and it's by feel. It's fairly recessed. So I used my 3/8 with, what is that, maybe a 3-4 inch extension. I used 2 of those and a short 10mm. Once I removed the hose, I had to go in like this and get way up under there and do it by feel to get, and I'll show you with some more lighting, up just to the right of the pulley there. Now, they're on fairly tight. So what I like about this particular 3/8 inch is I can add a little bit of length to it instead of having to find some cheater bar. But way down in here, okay, whoops. Give me a second. Okay. If you see where my finger is, right down in there and right back in there is where that 10mm is. It's a bear to get out, but it can be done. You really can't get it from underneath. Why? There's pulleys in the way. You might be able to with a long extension, but it's going to be difficult. And there is a hose on the bottom of the reservoir. That's the return hose. That became a problem also. Oh, and be careful, don't hit your sensor here. You have barely enough room to get under there and undo the clamp to unscrew this thing. And remember, it's plastic. Pump is off. This is the front side of the car. This is the rear. But you see the angle? And that's as far as it turns. So there's why your belt came off. Now, if anybody else has any theories about how this may have happened, please let me know. Put it in the comments. Share. Yep. Messed that up. Now, there's a hose. And this goes down into the space I'm going to show you. So here's the gap. 2 top bolts are there. Bottom bolt's there. And if you look down here, that lower hose on the reservoir connects. You see where my finger is pointing? To that metal tubing right at the end of my finger. You could see the barb on the end. Okay. In order to get that off, and this pump only pulls up so far, and you have to reach up under to get this hose off. Again, it's kind of blind when you pull it up, and I'll show you the length of the hose. My leak, I believe, was down there at the bottom. But oh no, it's not that easy. Let me show you the difficulty and what I had to do. You also notice there is a hose missing here and down there at the bottom. You can barely see it. Part of the coolant hose that I had to take apart to get to this connection for the power steering hose. Right down there. You just see the barb on the end. Here is said hose. So it's like this on the bottom of the unit there. See, like that? It's got a slight bend to it. That's a $60 part from Mazda. All right, so you see these are these tension clamps. Of course, they put them in such a location that they were about that far away from the doggone radiator. Oh. Of course, they put this together on the assembly line, so it doesn't matter. But when you do this, the only thing I was missing was that cable style clamp remover, which I bought one. So until I don't have enough time to wait on it, I've got one now. I've run into this problem before. So the cable style will reach down in there and it clamps on it, and you snap it and it catches, and you can pull these clamps off. So what I had to do was take my channel locks and work this thing around to a point to where I could get it. It's a pistol. Now, again, that's a $60 part. I couldn't get it aftermarket. Everything goes to Mazda. So I've decided to take a chance. I went to a place here in town that has hydraulic lines, and they have silicone. Silicone is rated for power steering. So who cares if it's blue? I got some silicone. I also got about 3 feet, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a little bit longer so that when I take this pump, if I have to take it apart again, I can lift it up to where I can reach it without having to do the feel around situation. So I'm going to put new clamps on there. I'm going to use the worm style. Now I think the barb is like 7/16 when I measure it out, and this is 1/2 inch. I think that's close enough. I'll know once I get it back together. All right, so here's the problem. I'm always on my head here. If you see the flashlight and you see the barb on the end there, that's where it's at. And you talk about a pain to get it off. There is the water coolant hose. And this hose here that's moving, that's the high pressure line that was up above with the banjo bolt. But there it is. Now, where'd all this fluid go? Aha! The aha moment. Let me show you. See said splash shield? I haven't taken it off yet. That whole splash shield is full of it. I'm going to take it to the car wash and clean it off. Let me pull it out so we can see better in the sunshine. Okay, so where did all of that power steering fluid go? Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you. I now have a new rating system. We're going to do before and after my videos. I call it Werty Dirds. That's just a bit of a spoonerism there. So if it requires profanity, it's going to be a score of a 0 to 5. 0 being easy job. 5 meaning, oh man, I'm going to put a sailor to shame. So I figured this would be at least a 2 when I began. By the time I'm done, I think it's going to be a 3. So I call it Werty Dirds. Now, technically, you could get this belt back on, because it's going to go here. It's very narrow back in there. You could get this back on without having to take the tire off and the splash shield. But I wanted to look to see where else there might be some drainage, some issues, some carnage. So I've elected to pull the splash shields. And there's something else. I'm going to show you a feature. You can't see it looking this way, but you'll be able to see it this way. You can get one of the rental tools, and it has a tensioner on it. One of the automatic tensioners. It's a 15 millimeter, and when you're facing, this is the passenger side, right front, you want to turn it clockwise to loosen the belt. So it's a tight fit, but you can do it. But I wanted to show you this neat little feature that I've seen on Hondas, on this car too. And it's just much easier to route everything once you get in here. But the splash shield is nothing, just a couple of plastic clips and stuff. Now this is the tensioner. Right there. There's your crank. And then work your way up. Alternator and stuff in the back. Alright, so I cleaned this up a little bit so you could see this. Let's see if I can get the focus on here. Alright, if you look very closely, now you're going to see 3 marks. Oops. You're going to see 3 marks on the moving part of the tensioner as it is. 1, 2, 3. So 1 there, 1 in the middle, 1 on the outside there. And there's 1 little arrow right there. Hard to see, but it's there. It lets you know how much stretch is in your belt. It'll let you know if it needs to be replaced based on stretch. Now, if you think about it, as the belt stretches, it's going to turn counterclockwise because the force is counterclockwise. Remember, I got to go clockwise. It actually says lift right there. You go clockwise in order to decrease the tension. And when you let it go, the tension will increase in a counterclockwise position. So as the belt stretches and wears, if it starts getting to that, gosh darn it, that mark down here, that lowest one, then you know it might be time to change the belt. Honda has that feature, most of them. It's kind of neat. But again, you got to take this apart to get to it. Oh, by the way, did I mention that when I took this apart, there was absolutely no power steering fluid? That hose all the way down to the metal hose, nothing, nada, zip, cero, no Jose, halas, finished, done, kaput. There was absolutely no power steering fluid. Again, that's why I'm worried about, is there going to be a problem with the steering rack? If so, that's going to cost that boy $1,000 to have it fixed. I ain't fixing that. I drove all the way to Greensboro to find this. Cost me $60, 50-mile one-way trip. Got it for 60 bucks. A new one, just the pump itself would be a couple of $100, and they're remands. Then the reservoir is another $100. Trying to find one with the reservoir already included, very difficult. Out of stock, out of stock, out of stock. Now, I saw in this one video, this guy says, oh, it's, you know, do this, this, and this. He did the seal kit, reseal kit. You pop these clips off. Well, I discovered it ain't so easy. You've got to lift this little tab right in here, but there's all this plastic in there. And it's going to require a bit of effort. Hope that you don't break it. Now, if you're familiar with a Mazda, see what this is? FOMO-CO. If you don't know what that stands for, Ford Motor Company. So Mazda is jointly owned pretty much by Ford Motor Company. To get those clips off, if you want to buy those clips at the dealership, they're at least, I don't know, 30 bucks. Oh my God. To see the problems you can get into for a $6 quart of power steering fluid a month, maybe. All right, we're back to finish this job. Had to give up. It was getting late yesterday. Now it's a little bit overcast and sprinkly. So I did get the pump back on. Everything is secure. Don't forget your sensor connector there. I forgot what the torque setting was for that. Give me a moment and I'll go in the house and check it out. I did put the belt back on. That was a bear. The one thing I didn't do was copy down the way the belt is applied, so I had to look it up. You want to be careful of that. You want to make sure that you apply it correctly. It was a bear because it's a new belt that when I ran this thing, as you can see, the tensioner is right there up top. The routing, I had to get under the car, 15mm socket, and pull extremely hard. It's much easier if it's up on a big rack. But I stretched and stretched and stretched and had just enough room to get that belt over that tensioner. Typically, you try and go over the idler pulleys because they're smooth, but there's just no way to reach it from the position that I'm in on the small jacks. So I got it most of the way on, and then I just took the crank and turned it just a little bit, and it snapped into place because it's grooved. Let me go get that torque setting. Everything is in foot-pounds, so that's 22 to 32 foot-pounds. I did it about 25. The bolts that actually hold the pump on are 14 to 18. I didn't torque those. It's hard to get a torque wrench in those. But if you've ever done a spark plug, just enough to be firm. And a spark plug roughly is 12 foot-pounds. It's by feel. You don't have to gorilla these. Just enough that they are firm and stay in place. The next thing I'm going to do is I have to go up under and replace the fender apron up under here. Close this up. I will also put the plastic skid plate back on. Oh, I did run this for about 45 minutes last night. No leaks, no drips, no runs. The true test is when I get it out on the highway and really apply some pressure when I make some turns. It took about, I want to say, a quart of the power steering fluid. And this car uses Dexron 3 automatic transmission fluid. But luckily he did not damage the steering rack from what I could tell. Smooth as butter. It's time to wrap it up. I have put everything back together. The splash shield underneath was missing a few screws, so I went to Lowe's and got me some. They are M6s by 1 by about 16 millimeters. I went ahead and got the 20 for a little added length, and I had to put some washers on there, and this plastic is, you know, cracked over time. Over here, I'm getting ready to put the tire back on, and you can see that I have put all the splash shields back in place. I'm going to put the tire on. Let's see, I cannot remember the torque of the lug nuts at the point. I'll have to go back and check that. I'm ill prepared. All right, double checked. 65 to about 87 foot-pounds. I'll torque it somewhere between 65 and 70. So I think it's done. Unless something just blows up on the test drive, I should be done with this particular project. And I'm now going to work on the seat position sensor on the driver's side. That's coming up next. I'll try and make a video of that too. Well, I hope this helps. Save you a few dollars. Figure out which tools you need, that it can be done. It does make it easier if it's up on ramps like I have. I have a quick jack. It's still on your back. Like I say, the toughest part of this was to get that belt on. I really had to crank down. It would help to have had a second set of hands. I had to get under the car and pull this way, and I mean tight. So on my Werty rating at the end of this, I'm going to have to give it maybe a 3.5. And that was just mainly because I had to drive 50 miles one way to get the part to save some money. $60 versus $400, so it was worth it. Once I get this back on the ground, I'm leaving it up high so I can get to that seat and do the sensor. I'll drop it on the ground and I'll torque these to 65 to 87 foot-pounds. I once again thank you. And just remember, I'll fix your car, but it won't go far. This is my daughter's boyfriend's car. It is a 2007 Mazda 6. It is the... Oh, hold on.
Derita, derita, derita. Stop, stop, stop. Okay, okay. Hop, 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 hop. Don't move. Ah, las paragus.